I'm Andy with Competitive Cyclist, and this is the Continental Aero 111 tubeless tire. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and say it because I know you're thinking it. $120 is way too much money to spend on a single bicycle tire, right? Perhaps in this case, it might be okay. And after riding one for the past few months, I'm here to tell you why I think it's very much worth the price. But first, let's talk about what this thing is. For the Aero 111, Continental was actually last to the party. As it turns out, DT Swiss and a wheel company I hadn't heard of until very recently, Swisside, were working together to develop an aerodynamic front tire. And after they'd tunnel tested several prototypes, it was a no-brainer to ask the creator of the fastest tire on Earth, the GP5000 STR, to bring the final product to market. As an aside, I'm pretty sure everybody knows DT Swiss, but if Swisside sounds familiar for some reason, it's because you just saw them in the Pro Peloton under Team Decathlon and Ben O'Connor, who almost won the 2024 Vuelta. Anyway, back to the lab. The goal was to create the most aerodynamic front tire possible so they could match it with their latest generation of wheels. After tons of experimentation, prototyping, and testing, they landed on the design you see here. These squares are called vortex generators, and they're pretty special because they create, you guessed it, vortices around the surface, which attached the airflow to both the tire and the rim, effectively turbocharging the sailing effect, also known as drag reduction. But here's what's new. This phenomenon begins occurring at a very low speed, around 18 miles per hour. So what this tire has done is effectively democratize speed. The Aero 111 makes it easy for everyone, even us amateurs, to pick up a little performance for a little extra dough. As an added bonus, the Aero 111 also creates a linear response to crosswinds. You know, when that gust hits your front wheel and steers the bike kind of out from under you, that's known as the steering moment. And with the 111 installed, the front end is far more stable in those crosswinds than it was before. And all that sounds great, but I can feel your skepticism, because I felt it too. For both this tire and the GP5000. I was told they were faster, but come on, really? We're at like $250, including tax and shipping for one of these, plus a GP5000 STR for the rear? That's about $50 more than a set of Vittoria Corsa Pros, or a Corsa Speed on the front, plus a Corsa Pro at the rear. And they only come in black, and you're limited to 26 or 29. But I'm here to tell you, none of that matters because it's every bit as fast as they say it is. As luck would have it, I picked up a 25C Vittoria Corsa Speed on eBay last year for like 30 bucks. I'd never installed it for some reason, so I pulled it off the shelf and threw it into the mix. Initially, I used an abbreviated version of my methodology from the Conti versus Vittoria shootout we did a few months ago. I chose a 1 mile loop with a climb, a descent, lots of 90-degree corners, and a tight hairpin and some flats, and rode my GP5000, then the Vittoria Speed, and ended on the 111. I chose 2 different tire pressures this time instead of 3, 60 and 80 PSI. And here's what I experienced. Like before, the GP5000 was surprisingly fast and very grippy at 60 PSI. At 80, it was faster with a noticeable decrease in ride quality. But there was no sponginess or sluggishness at all at this pressure, and they were super sticky in the corners. The 25C Vittoria wasn't great at 60 PSI, so I boosted it up to 70, and it felt better. Quick, responsive, and stable through the corners, but still not as fast as the GP5000, even after I pumped it up to 80 PSI. The 29C Aero 111 I tested was a revelation at any PSI and at any speed. It feels faster at low and high speeds than both of the other tires, and handled corners with the stability and grip you expect from a GP5000. But the coolest thing was how quickly it got up to speed from a dead stop, and how quickly it accelerated and maintained speed when you started to sprint. Like a supercar, both the 0 to 60 and the 80 to 100 times were head spinning. But that wasn't what made me do a serious double take. That happened a few days later on my go-to Saturday morning loop full of rollers. There's 2 spots in particular on that ride where I knew something was different. The first is a gravity cavity style W in the road, a short 20% descent with a little hump in the middle before an equally short 20% climb on the other side. Typically, I have to get out of the saddle on that other side and sprint at least 20 big, hard pedal strokes to make it over the short climb. This time, I stayed in the saddle and spun right up it, with only a short standing kick of about 5 strokes at the top. About 20 miles later, there's another descent with a short roller at the end that I've always had to pedal up. I've done this loop several hundred times, and this was the only time I was able to actually coast over the roller. I honestly didn't notice it until after I'd done it, so I turned around to see if it would happen again, and it did. Twice. Suffice it to say, in my experience, the advertised gains in aerodynamics, speed, and efficiency on the Conti Aero 111 are for real and absolutely worth the $30 to $40 premium you'll pay over a standard front tire. Okay, now let's bring Jono up for a quick Q&A.
We're here with the new Aero 111.
We are indeed.
Got a few questions for you.
Cool.
What is the flat protection like? Is this as trusty as the GP 5000?
I think it is. I only used it for like a month, but it was a month in the arid desert part of Southern California where I live, where there's goat heads everywhere, and I ran through a couple of patches of broken glass on the side of the road that didn't give me any punctures or problems at all. So it feels in every way, shape, and form like a Continental GP 5000, so I'm going to assume it's very similar from a durability perspective. And it's got the black chili, and it's got their belting and everything. It's just a different kind of top layer. So.
Yeah, the cutouts.
Yeah, no worries from a durability standpoint.
Good to know. I noticed there's not a lot of tread. So on wet roads, did you get experience any of that living in Southern California? I know it's...
Yeah, I didn't ride it in the wet, so I can't say that I had good or bad experiences. I don't know. I'm going to say, based on the assumption, that has actually more tread. These channels go deeper than a GP 5000. So my guess is going to be that it would clear water better if the water gets too deep, and probably handle a little bit better in wet conditions than the GP 5000. Just a guess, just a theory. Don't hold me to that.
Either way, I probably wouldn't push it too hard. I'm scared when the roads are wet.
Yeah.
What about braking performance? Did you notice any decline in that, or is having it being the same compound as a GP 5000, it feels just as strong braking?
I'm thinking about that because I'm trying to reflect on the little test course I did in my neighborhood. There's kind of a downhill hairpin that's like a little divided road, and that was my hard brake, hard corner, and then sprint up it. Felt very similar to the GP 5000. I didn't notice any slippage, any chatteriness. Felt really close because of the way it accelerates, right? Does it feel the same decelerating under braking? I'll have to test that again and get back to you, because that's not something I paid attention to. But there was nothing that really stood out under hard braking. Didn't feel any better, didn't feel any worse.
Didn't feel squirmy?
No, not at all. Not at all. It felt very much like a Conti.
Would you use this tire under normal training rides, or would you save it for the fast weekend ride and your races? Do you want to wear out a $120 tire just putzing around town?
That kind of gets into my philosophy of building a bike, and that is, why not have the fastest stuff possible on your everyday bike, right? And typically, like, I know I mentioned that Corsa Speed tire, right? That's kind of a race day only application that's thin and doesn't have much puncture protection. And so, yeah, if it were that, sure, that'd be a race day only application. But this is something you can literally ride every day. It's durable enough. It's puncture resistant. The wear life on a Continental tire, you can get a year out of this thing. So why wouldn't you?
Yeah, if it's like the GP 5000, like people race on those and they train on them.
Yeah, exactly. So my philosophy is, throw it on your everyday bike and get those gains on every single ride that you take.
For sure.
Yep.
What are your thoughts on using this tire on a non-aero bike?
A non-aero bike?
Yeah, so let's say like a Specialized Athos or something.
Yeah,
like a climbing bike. Would you ever run an aero tire on a non-aero
absolutely.
bike? Okay.
My bike is a non-aero bike. My aero bike is a non-aero bike. And the reason I'm saying absolutely is because not only is it aerodynamic at high speeds, but the aerodynamic gains kick in at like 18 miles per hour. And I felt even like one of the coolest phenomenon that I experienced with this tire is coming to a stoplight or a stop sign and re-accelerating up to speed. It got there so much faster than even the GP 5000. And then on a climb, you want to hop out of the saddle, you want to attack, you want to accelerate a little bit on a section. There was far less resistance, and it was a lot quicker up to speed even when you're climbing. So yeah, I would absolutely put it on a climbing bike.
Sweet. I actually threw this on my gravel bike.
No way.
Just to test, yeah. And I felt like it was faster. I don't know if it was just a mental thing, like, oh, it says Aero on the side, I'm going to be faster. But I felt faster, and Strava says I was.
And I think as long as you're like on champagne gravel and you've got it at the right.
Yeah, I mean, I was on the road,
pressure.
on the gravel bike.
Oh, okay, got it.
You could do some light gravel, but would not recommend.
No, wouldn't recommend that either.
What do you think the typical lifespan is on this tire? Similar to the GP5000, or are you going to get less?
I would say 100% similar to the GP5000. It looks and feels and smells and acts and rides almost exactly like a GP5000. It's the same tire underneath with just kind of that different top layer. Mm-hmm. So durability wise, like it's going to be a great investment. It's going to last you a long time. You know, I would say a year or more. You probably want to replace it, you know, after 8 to 12 months of riding, just because tires kind of start to dry out and they start to lose their performance and all that. But like from a longevity perspective, it's every bit a GP5000 under the surface.
Yeah, I'd mentioned like the grooves as well. Like if you lose those, you're kind of losing the advantage of the tire. So maybe if you're in an area that has really cambered roads, I can see one side wearing more than the other. So you want to keep an eye on that.
I think so. But like if you can wear out a tire on the edges here, I'm not. You're too fast for me, man. You're descending like a madman.
Yeah. What about a crit race? Would this be good for that?
Oh, that's a good question.
Because you're leaning over more. You're like in that groove. I don't know.
It gripped great in corners. Okay. So I would absolutely want this tire in a crit race, especially because of the way it accelerates, right? And if you're in a crit with a lot of 90-degree corners and a lot of surges, 100% this tire, no doubt. But yeah, maybe a summer of crit racing, and let's put on a new one for the winter for training.
Makes sense.
Yep.
Last question. As an amateur cyclist, is this still a good investment? I know it's a pricey tire, but I think a lot of people do chase those marginal gains. Yeah. And I mean, do you think it's worth it for the amateur, or is it just for that competitive cyclist?
If your bike has tubeless, if you can accommodate a 26 or a 29-inch tire up front, and if it's time to buy new tires and you're looking at the GP5000s, put this one on the front.
Yeah, give it a shot.
Absolutely. Regardless of where you are on the spectrum of amateur to experienced, it's worth it, without a doubt, to spend the extra money and do that. You know, for a lot of riders, the Tuesday night ride that's their race. Oh, yeah. The Saturday morning ride, that's their race, right? So why not give yourself every possible advantage?
Absolutely. No, I agree with you. Well, if you have any more questions about this tire or any tires that we do carry, reach out to one of our gearheads today. And if you like this video, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And we'll see you at the next gear review.